largely leveraging the CLIPS program, landers every month starting beginning of 2027. I mean, we are going to plus up for moon-based construction in a huge way. If that expertise is the difference between turning our rocket in months versus years, they're coming back to NASA. Time is of the essence right now. We do have a competitor. This is all going to come down to months, not years. Let's get everybody focused again on doing what NASA was intended to do from the start, which is achieve the near impossible in space. Let's get to the moon. Let's build the base. And I think bringing people together in that area, like we've seen with the recent 2026 NASA reauthorization bill, is maybe where some of my past experience have been most helpful.
It's been just about 3 months since Jared Isaacman stepped into the role of NASA Administrator, and the businessman and commercial astronaut has hit the ground running, zigzagging across the nation to visit all of the NASA centers and hear directly from the workforce about what they feel is working well with the agency and what can be improved. In the lead up to the Artemis 2 mission set to launch in potentially just a few weeks, we had the opportunity to sit down with Administrator Jared Isaacman and hear from him directly about his goals for NASA, some of the initiatives he has in mind, the path that he hopes to lay for the agency during his tenure. Here's our conversation with Jared Isaacman. So Administrator Isaacman, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. I know it's a busy time as always, but appreciate your time, sir.
No, absolutely. Happy to chat.
And obviously there's a lot to chat about. We're smack in the middle of the Flight Readiness review for Artemis 2, and we'll get to some of the more topical things that are happening this week. But, having the opportunity to talk with you since you've been in the administrator role, wanted to start with you and your background, having come from 2 commercial astronaut missions and the background that you've had as a pilot, and also just through Polaris, being able to start to build your version of a space program. I wonder, having brought that experience into this role as administrator, how that sort of informed your mindset of tackling these next few years in this role.
Well, I would say my background and experience where it's helpful in this position. One, I'm a student of history, so take all my business experience and commercial space aside. I love NASA. I know a lot about what this agency did in its earliest days and how they were able to do it, and I think that's pretty important because we are trying to go back to basics in a lot of ways. Of how we got to the moon before is how we should be looking at returning to the moon now. How we build the moon base, let's make sure we do that in an iterative approach. We had Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, an awful lot of Apollo missions before we landed. Let's remind ourselves we can do that instead of jumping to dream states and such. So I just say understanding our history is rather important. In terms of my experience, for sure, having an opportunity to go to space twice. One was very much a developmental mission, where you started with a good idea and then we were able to see it all the way through. Through completion. That's helpful. Gives me, again, perspective of how commercial space likes to operate, but also having a great appreciation, again, of kind of how NASA has historically done things. But I'd say running 2, large companies where you have to bring a lot of people together to do the hard things. Stakeholders matter a lot with NASA. We have a lot of people who love NASA, especially all across Congress, right? They all want to see us do great things. They all probably kind of have their own idea what those great things are, and probably involve a lot of the companies in their states as well. And it's like, okay, we understand that. Let's bring everybody together. We're going to focus on the mission because time is of the essence right now. We do have a competitor. This is all going to come down to months, not years. Let's get everybody focused again on doing what NASA was intended to do from the start, which is achieve the near impossible in space. Let's get to the moon. Let's build the base. And I think bringing people together in that area, like we've seen with the recent 2026 NASA reauthorization bill, is maybe where some of my past experience have been most helpful at this point.
Well, and obviously the great thing that's still in the spotlight, of course, is the Artemis 2 mission.
For sure.
You're smack in the middle of the Flight Readiness review of, it's, as you mentioned, a good opportunity to really bring everyone into the same room and make sure that the team is on the same page. How has that assessment been going so far, yesterday and, heading back into it later today?
Well, I think there are no surprises so far. So I would say it's proceeding well. So no showstoppers have emerged that, we're going to have to pause and really chase this down. It is still ongoing. It should wrap up hopefully around noon today. And then, of course, we'll have a press conference and you can hear from some of our leadership as to how things are progressing. Until we get it out to the pad, get everything hooked up, start doing our checks, I'm going to keep my enthusiasm measured a little bit. But we're going to get back out to the pad pretty soon.
One of your benchmarks for this mission has been, we'll make assessments as we go along. There are flight windows, but a flight date won't be set until we get through the FRR and really get our feet under us. When we hear from you later today, should we expect to hear a little bit more of a fine tuning of we're targeting this date?
So you probably won't hear from me. I'm not going to be at this press conference, but I suspect the leadership team will come out of this and say that the beginning of our April launch window is on the table. And I'm sure they will also say, now let's get our rocket back out to 39B. Let's get it integrated into the pad area, do some of our checks, make sure we're feeling good. There's a lot of steps from now until launch day, but I suspect they'll say that the beginning of the window is looking like a possibility.
That's excellent. One of the big news items of the week, of course, has been the NASA OIG report that was looking specifically at the landers, and I want to come back to that in a second. But one of the things that they also highlighted was the importance of NASA historically of, test as you fly, which has been a mantra we've heard, in numerous arenas. The Artemis program seems to be a bit of an exception, obviously, a program that you inherited, but the changes from Artemis 1 to Artemis 2 being the fact that this version of Orion will fly the Eclipse system for the first time. Artemis 3 will fly a different heat shield. So given that context, I wonder how you're thinking of that phrase, test as you fly, both as it applies to Artemis, but also just more broadly across NASA.
Well, we are trying to course correct, I would say, and I very much appreciate the OIG reports. I very much appreciate the ASAP reports. This is, I wish more people did in recent history so that we could have taken some of these steps to course correct a little bit sooner when we had more time, not less schedule margin like we have now. But yes, they are pointing out things that I think should be relatively, obvious in a lot of ways. Like you don't go from an uncrewed test to around the moon to land on the moon. You don't make those kind of those type of leaps and hope for success. You can't fly a rocket this complicated every 3 years. I can tell you half of the afternoon yesterday in FRR was talking about, what happened with the hydrogen leaks, what happened with the helium flow issues, which were essentially identical to Artemis 1. So anyone kind of critical of the approach we're taking now of increasing cadence and trying to standardize, I don't think has read some of these OIG reports over the years or read the ASAP report, have an affinity for something like EUS or a second mobile launcher. And I really need this for the future, I imagine, of Artemis 20 years from now. Well, you might not see its 4th or 5th mission for 20 years from now if we don't start taking action, standardizing, addressing the valid concerns that are coming from independent authorities on this, saying, are you looking? Are you reading what we're telling you? This is not, a good recipe for success. It is time to make some changes. And that's what we're doing now. And it is absolutely consistent with OIG and ASAP.
So in that sort of reimagined Artemis 3 mission now that's more of like an Apollo 9 style flight in low Earth orbit, given I imagine there will still be some Delta V left with the ICPS, have you started to imagine what additional CubeSats or extra things you might be able to do with that? Maybe could we see a revival of Janus, for example?
Yeah, so this was it Scott Manley or post the other day of they're going to have a lot of performance in the second stage. I would just say we haven't even determined if we are going to use ICPS on Artemis 3. We may not have to, in which case you've got that stage available. So we are still doing the mission design for Artemis 3. We are going to do multiple things at once. I've made very clear around here, there's no message of everybody stops in an organization with, call it 50,000 people between our contractors and civil servants, some of the best the nation has to offer, and just wait for Artemis 2 to be done. Teams are working with our partners now on Artemis 3 mission design. We do have a request for information out to both SpaceX and Blue Origin to tell us what they think is achievable by 2027. And based on that feedback, we'll use it for ultimately crew selection, but making a determination of do we even need to use our upper stage in this regard.
Jumping to that assessment from both Blue and SpaceX, when do you expect to have enough data back from them to make a call on sort of refining the architecture of what Orion may meet for Artemis 3?
I would say 60 to absolute 90 days at the most. And now, keep in mind, we were having these conversations with him before the announcement, the no surprises. That's why you saw Boeing, ULA, Lockheed, SpaceX, Blue Origin, plus all of our congressional leadership come out behind us when we took this approach for standardization, increased cadence, because they all knew that the past approach was not going to lead to good outcomes like we'd want on this. So we've had an opportunity to socialize this with SpaceX and Blue Origin in advance of, do you support this approach to buy down risk for landing? Both have said yes. Now we're getting some of the technical specifics back. Are we going into LEO? Is this a HEO type mission? Does that change whether or not we're going to incorporate ICPS? That will be a factor. And then again, based on what they're willing to commit to, we're going to look to our astronaut corps, who has a lot of experience, who may be working on this, and that's going to probably inform crew selection.
Going back to looking forward to that crew selection, of course, as I'm sure everyone is. In the report that was published on Tuesday, it mentions, some of the things that they had raised concerns with as far as specifically Starship, because as this was being assessed, it was looking at data up through November 2025.
Yes.
Of course, before the architecture change.
Yeah.
Pointing to things that are not going to be on the uncrewed landing demonstration, at least of right now, which include the Eclipse system, the docking, and the evaluation of the elevator. In a reimagined Artemis 3, how much of that can be addressed in addition to the docking, which I know is sort of front of mind at this point?
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead, right? So we need industry to get back to us on what they're willing to commit to and what help they need, right? We've been saying it across NASA, like, we are not going to sit on our hands here and just tell all of our vendors, go faster, and hope it's going to work, right? We are going to start attaching people. We're pulling people from JPL right now, subject matter experts, and across the agency, and saying, you're going to this vendor, you're assigned to this part on the critical path launch. You own this now, and you're going to report back and help drive outcomes. And we are going to exercise some of the language I incorporated in the last workforce directive on restoring our core competencies, taking control of IP if necessary, the right to repair, where NASA itself will fix things as necessary. So we're going to hear what our vendors are willing to commit to. We're going to attach NASA personnel to it, and we're going to start driving. Outcomes. So does that mean things could be different than an OIG report that was written before I arrived that reflects a different time period? I sure hope so. I mean, that's why they're writing the report, is for action. Do things differently. That's what we're going to do. So I expect there's no question we're going to fly in 2027. We obviously want to incorporate as many capabilities that we can test in an integrated fashion between Orion and the lander in 2027. Buy down risk for 2028. What those are, what specifics they may be, I won't have that for you, but I don't think you have to wait long. I think, again, next 69 days, we owe it to everyone to describe what Artemis 3 is going to look like.
Have more report questions, but just since you brought up the workforce, in the announcement of NASA Force, it sounds like it's sort of a two-pronged approach to, as you mentioned, restoring core competencies to the agency. How are you thinking about which positions are best suited for the sort of short-term NASA Force style approach versus the flipping of contractors into more permanent civil servants?
Right. So they are very much two different initiatives. I think some people may have confused that a little bit of like, NASA's looking to solve its workforce problem with just a bunch of, term-based employees. Wrong. That's not the case. First is we're looking to, the 40,000+ contractors. I mean, many of them you have here at Kennedy Space Center that are working for staffing agencies that are actually working in exploration ground systems. The team that I need to turn the launch pad, in months, not years. We're bringing them back on. I mean, Kennedy Space Center alone, it's thousands have already been submitted and are being reviewed right now to move from contractor to civil servant. And we're learning things along the way, old dated policies that don't make sense. This person has an engineering degree, but it wasn't accredited by this particular organization, so therefore they must be a contractor. We trust them to do the work on the rocket as a contractor, but some 30-year-old policy at NASA says they can't be a civil servant. Wrong. We're fixing that right now. It's like, if that expertise is the difference between turning our rocket in months versus years, they're coming back to NASA. And that's taking place at every one of the centers. Mission control is going to be 100%. If you badge into mission control, you're going to be a civil servant. So that's thousands that we're just fixing. And along the way, it's freeing up resources. I mean, you can't mention that enough. Like, there's a lot of people like pound the table about what the Apollo budget was, and NASA's nowhere near that. So therefore, we should have no expectation of greatness. Wrong. We're going to fix that. We get $25 billion a year plus 10 billion plus up from the one big beautiful bill. We can do a lot of extraordinary things with those resources. Well, you know what? You can get $1 billion more. Start converting a lot of your contractors back to civil servants like they always should be. It's completely illogical that somebody could have a 30, 40-year career working on rockets or working in mission control in a contractor capacity because someone 40 years ago thought we had these artificial hiring ceilings. So doing that frees up resources to do more science and discovery. So that's the contractor to civil servant conversion. Then it's, where does this NASA force come in, which is this initiative with OPM? It's acknowledging we are not the only game in town. I mean, there are people in industry that are doing some pretty wild things. You know, we got some orbital launch towers being built here. We got rockets that can go, come back and land on ships. They probably have learned a thing or two over the years. Why wouldn't we want people who are willing to serve their country, come in to NASA for 2 years, bring that expertise, and elevate our younger talent? Because that pipeline is not, we have no challenge with our kind of young pipeline. There's so many kids who want to grow up, go to school, come work at NASA. We have great internship programs. Over 1,000 people every year get to be part of our various internship programs. How do we elevate them? And we've got a lot of pros inside NASA to do that, but we will happily take people from industry to come in for a couple years, serve their country, and bring their expertise back to NASA.
And I imagine that those two initiatives were born in part from your, full centers tour, the various portals that you've opened up to bring in ideas of things people like, things people would like to see changed. Based off of the patterns and the specific data points you've been able to gather from that, what's kind of the next big Jared Isaacman initiative stemming from what you've been hearing from the workforce?
Well, I think in the not too distant future, we're going to bring a lot of people together in DC to talk about a handful of major initiatives. We're going to go into greater specifics on Artemis acceleration and what that looks like past Artemis 5. If you're building a moon base and you're going there to stay, well, you're going to need lots of missions to and from the moon from a crew perspective, from a logistics perspective. So there's going to be an Artemis acceleration discussion. We're going to talk about the moon base. I want landers on the moon in the South Pole on a monthly cadence starting in the beginning of 2027. There is a lot to build out there. We got comms, navigation, we've got power. We're going to start doing some like surface improvement demonstrations. We're going to have rovers everywhere. So there's a lot to talk about on that. We're going to talk about nuclear power and propulsion. We're going to talk about more missions of science and discovery. So there's a lot of good coming up. Those are like, I'd say like the sexier topics everybody gets really excited about. And then we have just lots of workforce directives and initiatives that are coming out. That is going to be based on all the information gathering that's been taking place, that continues to take place, the thousands of submissions from the workforce, from industry of how does NASA do better. And it's like, you can't do all those fun, exciting things we want to build a moon base if you don't address all these very real concerns and problems that come up from the workforce where, whether it's policy, regulation, things that are just impeding progress, you have to clear it out and unleash them. So we'll talk about those too. This is all in works right now. Like nobody's waiting, months or years to hear about it. It's weeks.
But you got to patch the cracks in the foundation before you build something
extraordinary. Yeah, well, you're going to have to do both. Like and frankly, that's what the taxpayers should expect of us with the $25 billion a year we get. That's like for the space-loving community around the world should have very high expectations for NASA. We can work on all those exciting things and fix some of those cracks, as you mentioned, at the same time.
The promise of Starship as both a cargo and a human lander, I think, to your point, has excited a lot of people's imagination just by the sheer volume of what it has the capability of bringing as architected. But going back to both this report as well as the ASAP report that was looking back in 2025, did raise some concerns about the height to width of Starship landing at the South Pole in poor lighting in an environment where there's a lot of rocky craters and, it only has so much latitude before you get into a tip-over situation, which no one wants to see, obviously, with something that big. So having had the opportunity to talk with SpaceX leadership, see the development of Starship for NASA's purposes, can you talk about what you've seen and understand that maybe those of us on the outside don't, that gives you confidence in that type of architecture to work in that environment?
Sure. Well, I would just say in terms of where my attention is with Starship and HLS is all about enabling flight rate and on-orbit prop transfer. I believe if they can get their flight rate up and they can pull off on-orbit cryo prop transfer, the landing is not going to be our problem. I have high confidence they will solve it. And let me tell you why. First of all, a lot of these issues being raised, again, were prior to some of the actions we're taking now. We have a national space policy from President Trump, says build the moon base. I want to bring the world along with that construction, which means we're going to put up assets for comm relay and observation so we can see as the moon base is almost being constructed in real time. I think this is going to be a great thing to inspire people and show what we're capable of doing. Well, doing that, we're going to start to better be able to analyze the environment that we're going to send HLS landers into at some point. I also said we're going to start landing, largely leveraging the CLIPS program, landers every month starting the beginning of 2027. I mean, we are going to plus up for moon-based construction in a huge way. Every time one of those landers comes down, we're going to learn something. We are going to do surface improvement demonstrations. So we are going to land, larger rovers and have them improve the surface down there where you may one day be creating a landing pad for these HLS providers. We have the opportunity to do all this in parallel while our landers are in development. And you know what? You also have Blue Origin. They're working on capabilities too. They're going to start landing Mark 1s, right? They're going to have an uncrewed Mark 1 demonstration. They're going to take Viper, to the surface. They're going to learn from every one of these. So everyone's going to get a lot of shots on goal over the next couple of years in advance of a crewed landing.
To that point, though, you're, as you mentioned at the top of our conversation, both a student of history as well as a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a great appreciation for the importance of manual piloting, especially, given the context of all the Apollo missions needing that came into play very importantly during the Starliner crew flight test. The plan right now, though, is that Starship would not have a manual piloting functionality to it. Is that something you're looking to change, or how is that aspect being examined in your mind?
So this is an ongoing discussion. I would just say that when it comes to manual piloting, not even NASA and our astronauts want to have direct input over the thrusters. So let's be really clear. We all acknowledge that's not the right thing to do. So it would be some form of a fly-by-wire where a human is interfacing with the computers and saying, what is happening I don't like, and I'd like it to do something else. And right now, there is already a capability in the HLS lander for a manual retarget designation, which is exactly what we have in the Dragon spacecraft as well. To say, okay, this is where we're coming down is not going to work for me, go here. It's how we program emergency deorbits in Dragon. It would be a component of the HLS lander. So in that respect, you're saying this cratered out doesn't look good. I want to go there. And Starship would adjust its trajectory to ideally make that landing. I'm very much in support of that capability. Now, to go steps farther than that, where you could potentially take control, of the vehicle itself and not let the computers do it, that is one where I need to understand, and I've told this to our astronaut corps too, because I want to balance everybody's interest in this. Talk me through the faults that would happen in that kind of critical phase of flight approaching landing, where the correct decision would be to take control over the vehicle instead of aborting. Because understand, we make that decision and we get that wrong. It's not the mission that's at risk. It could be America's ambitions on the moon at risk. There are probably scenarios where the right thing to do in that circumstance is say, we came this far. We certainly had less of an iterative approach as we did during Apollo. Maybe we come back another time to do this. But if there is an example where, yes, under these circumstances and these faults taken, we can still safely proceed under manual control, I am absolutely willing to advocate for that with our partners and ensure we have the right capabilities.
And as you mentioned, of course, Blue Origin is the other contracted lander that's preparing Mark II, as Mark I is getting ready to fly at least once this year without the Viper rover. It'll carry that on the next flight, which will be great to see that at the South Pole. Their original plan, and please stop me if this has changed, but as far as the report mentions, notes that the critical design review for Mark II is coming up this July, and it was originally scheduled to perform an uncrewed landing demo in February of 2029. What have they shown you that's made you confident or put you on the right direction that Mark II could be ready to dock with Orion next year for the Artemis 3 mission?
Right. So again, I would say I am very much a fan of OIG, ASAP reports, any of the independent review authorities that look into how we do things at NASA and provide guidance on how to do it better. Just keep in mind that was written and look back on a period that has changed significantly right now.
Sure.
I think Blue Origin's been very public that they've push pause on some other programs to concentrate on their lunar effort. So they are putting a lot of resources behind it. They've got a lot of Mark 1s that are coming. Those are all going to be good learning opportunities. And of course, both Blue Origin and SpaceX have proposed acceleration proposals. And I would guarantee you what Blue Origin has proposed is very different than their original Mark II proposal. So that changes the game. Both scenarios bring down some of the engineering risk that was in their original plans, which is good, which allows you to pull in timelines and schedules. So I do think we're looking at a different schedule than where we were before. And again, before we ever came out public on it, there were conversations with all of the partners that support the Artemis program, the primes that are on SLS, and the landers, and said, are you prepared to commit to this acceleration proposal and make a rendezvous happen in 27? And they all said yes.
So since we unfortunately don't have the benefit of being the NASA administrator, but have the opportunity to talk to you, can you give us more of a concrete idea of what these accelerated plans look like? Like, what are they either removing or simplifying to help the public understand like what that actually means tangibly?
I don't know if I can. They're both, both proposals have a lot of intellectual property in it. There's some proprietary data. I would strongly encourage both to share those results whenever the time is right. Maybe, as I mentioned, we have somewhat of an event coming in the next couple of weeks where we're going to talk about how we're accelerating SLS production, building the moon base. Be a great opportunity if our partners want to come out and share a little bit of their strategy. I also respect, just as we have a great competitor in China that's competing for the moon right now. You have two very very talented organizations that are competing for a lander. So maybe they don't want to go into overwhelming detail on it. I will just say, again, relative to the original plans, both have put forth technical proposals on how to accelerate a landing, how to take down significant risk that was in their technical risk, which brings down some of the schedule risk.
Speaking of China, in the context of space, it's often brought up sort of in that context of being a great rival. But I wonder, in an era where we've been cooperating with the former Soviet Union and now Russia in low Earth orbit, is there a future that you could foresee in which, given the similarities in ambitions in space, on the civil side at least, between the US and China, that there could be more of a cooperative environment as opposed to one that's slightly more rivalry oriented?
Well, it would take an act of Congress. So we are, by law, prevented from collaborating with the Chinese on America's space program. So I would say there would have to be some significant changes in terms of the kind of geopolitical environment, our relationship with China. That said, look, they are very good. And, I've said it many times, in hindsight, we had all the schedule margin in the world against the Soviets. We went to the moon, we left in 1972, and no human's been back since until we'll get there with the Artemis missions ahead. That is not the case with the Chinese right now. I say it, this is going to be measured in months, not years. So they are extremely capable. They intend to build out a lunar research station. They're going to put nuclear power on the moon. And I think they will use the moon as a proving ground for missions farther out into space, including into Mars. So we got a great competitor right now. We're leaning into it, right? This is, again, how you motivate a workforce, you bring out the best. It becomes a forcing dynamic for partners to rethink their approach like we're doing with HLS. Okay, you don't maybe have as much time as you thought. Let's go back to the drawing board. Don't sacrifice the game-changing capabilities that are going to elevate America's game in space, but let's think about what an acceleration pathway looks like so we can get the job done. But yeah, all that said, I would also say, like, the International Space Station is a fantastic example of international cooperation, including with our Russian partners. But like we can see in conflict right now, space is very much a military domain. China has military assets in space for sure. The Russians do as well. So that's not lost on us as we're considering who our partners are, and we're venturing out on great missions like returning to the moon.
Well, I could talk to you all day, but being respectful of your time, we'll make this my last question. As we're sitting here on March 12th, it's just a couple of days away from the 100th anniversary of when Robert Goddard launched the first liquid-propelled rocket.
Yeah.
You mentioned in, I think, basically every appearance I've seen you in that, NASA needs to really focus on doing the near impossible. So given this anniversary and what was inspired and propelled there, pun it very much intended, what do you foresee as being the next big sort of lifting moment from NASA? What is that near impossible thing that you really want to see NASA wrap its arms around?
Well, I think moving from so I'll hit on two things. I think building the moon base is going to be a very big deal. So the accomplishment of keeping astronauts alive in low Earth orbit at the International Space Station for more than a quarter century continuously is extraordinary, right? Like I'd say that very much falls in the near impossible category. All that said, if you did want to keep people alive for a quarter of a century and give them, the best chance for success, you're probably picking low Earth orbit. We're hours away from getting them back in an emergency in water. You get plenty of protection from solar radiation, from MMOD, right? It's a different ballgame when we go to the moon, all right? Now we're gonna have to think about, okay, we're gonna build habitats. We're gonna probably need, surface improvement rovers to try and cover some of that habitat with regolith, provide greater protection from an extremely harsh environment. Now you're gonna be able to work with materials on the surface around you. Again, whether that's through like 3D printing with lunar regolith, mining helium-3, working with ice for in-situ resource manufacturing for propellant, this becomes like kind of the next natural proving ground. And if there are issues, you are days away from coming back to Earth, not hours. So like we are progressing, I think, in the right way. Now, in terms of vehicle architecture, right? We're lucky that it is the most competitive, healthiest industry we've seen in America's space program when it comes to chemical propulsion. You now have two players that have demonstrated, reusability of their first stage. Probably won't be long before we see one of them demonstrate reusability on their second stage. This is a time where NASA can recalibrate, start looking at things that they are not capable of doing. I don't think either one of them are going to stand up operations for like highly enriched uranium and building nuclear reactors for nuclear power and propulsion, which is just going to be key enabling technology for astronauts going to Mars, but even just exploring deeper into the solar system. I mean, we're giving a lot of thought to missions. Okay, we're definitely doing a Pathfinder. I don't think I've kept that a secret, so that's coming up. But when you start thinking about fast follow type missions, what could you do? I mean, you could run down Voyager out there in 5 years potentially. I mean, that's pretty wild to think about for a mission that's been ongoing for a half century, right? It really expands your exploration and discovery potential when you get farther away from the sun. So that is where I think is going to be like one of the next big, focus areas for NASA in the years ahead.
With a demonstration in 2028, I hear.
That's right.
Jared Isaacman, Administrator for NASA, thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Appreciate it, bud.